The summer heat in Kentucky was unforgiving, pressing down on the small roadside diner like a heavy blanket. Muhammad Ali wiped his brow as he stepped out of his Cadillac. It was 1973, 5 months after his devastating loss to Ken Norton that had broken his jaw, and he needed time away from the spotlight. The once proclaimed greatest was at a crossroads in his career, fighting not just opponents in the ring, but also the U.S. government over his refusal to serve in Vietnam, costing him nearly 4 years of his prime fighting days. The bell above the diner door jingled as Ali stepped inside, his 6'3" frame commanding attention despite his attempt to remain inconspicuous. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a light button-up shirt, a far cry from the flashy attire the public was accustomed to seeing him in. He chose a booth near the back, nodding politely to the elderly waitress who approached with a coffee pot, and a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes in this small town where racial tensions simmered just beneath the surface. If this story has already made you feel something, no matter how small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. Outside, the rumble of motorcycles broke the afternoon quiet. 7 bikes pulled into the gravel parking lot, their riders dismounting with the confidence of men who were used to intimidating everyone in their path. The leader, a burly man with a thick beard and arms covered in faded tattoos, spat on the ground before pushing open the diner door. The group filed in, leather vests displaying their colors, the Iron Skulls, a notorious group known throughout the county for their troublemaking and racist views. The atmosphere in the diner shifted immediately. The few other customers hunched over their meals, eyes down, while the waitress's hands trembled slightly as she refilled Ali's coffee cup. "Don't make trouble," she whispered, barely audible. "They've been worse since the factories started laying off white workers and hiring colored folks at lower wages." Ali nodded almost imperceptibly. He understood America's racial dynamics all too well. Born Cassius Clay in Louisville, just 90 miles away, he had experienced discrimination his entire life, even as an Olympic gold medalist. His conversion to Islam and name change had only intensified the hatred directed at him by certain segments of society. The bikers sprawled across 2 tables, laughing loudly and making crude comments. Their leader, who went by the name Crusher, kept glancing toward Ali's booth, his eyes narrowing as recognition slowly dawned. The boxer pretended not to notice, focusing instead on the menu while mentally calculating the distance to the exit. He hadn't come looking for trouble, but trouble had a way of finding him regardless of where he went. "Hey boys," Crusher finally said, his voice carrying deliberately across the diner. "Ain't that the draft-dodging Muslim over there? The one who thinks he's too good to fight for America?" The other bikers turned, their expressions morphing from curiosity to malice as they recognized the famous face. Ali set down his menu slowly, his fighter's instincts kicking in as he assessed the situation. 7 against 1 weren't good odds, even for someone with his skills. But he'd faced worse in his life, both in and out of the ring. What concerned him more was the elderly couple in the corner booth and the young waitress, who would undoubtedly be caught in any crossfire. "I'm just passing through," Ali said calmly, his voice carrying the same melodic quality that had captivated audiences worldwide. "Looking to enjoy a quiet meal like everyone else here." Crusher stood, pushing his chair back with a screech against the linoleum floor. "Well, ain't that too bad," he sneered, cracking his knuckles as his companions rose beside him. "Because we got a message for people like you who disrespect our country, and we're about to deliver it." The diner fell silent as Crusher approached Ali's table, flanked by his gang members. Their heavy boots thudded against the floor, the sound reminiscent of a countdown timer ticking toward inevitable violence. Ali remained seated, outwardly calm though his muscles tensed beneath his casual clothing. Years of training had conditioned his body to respond to threats with calculated precision rather than panic. "You know who I am," Ali stated rather than asked, his Louisville accent more pronounced than it was during his televised interviews. "And I know what you're thinking. But consider this carefully, gentlemen. I've faced Joe Frazier for 15 rounds. I've taken punches from Sonny Liston. What do you think your chances are?" Crusher's face reddened beneath his beard. "You think you're something special? Out here, you ain't got no referee to save you, no crowd to impress. Out here, you're just another—" He spat a racial slur that made the elderly woman in the corner gasp. Ali's expression didn't change, though something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He'd heard that word all his life, from schoolyards in Kentucky to streets across America. The boxer stood slowly, his movement fluid and controlled. At 6'3" and 220 pounds of highly trained muscle, his physical presence dominated the space between the tables. If this story has already made you feel something, no matter how small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. I've never looked for trouble, Ali said, his voice carrying the rhythmic cadence that had made his speech patterns as famous as his fighting style. But I've never run from it either. Now there are innocent people here who don't deserve to see violence, so I'll step outside with you if that's what you want. The diner owner, a balding man in his 60s, emerged from the kitchen with a shotgun. "Nobody's stepping outside for nothing," he said firmly, though his hands shook slightly. "This is my establishment, and I won't have fighting here, not from you," he nodded toward the bikers. "And not from you either," he added, looking at Ali. Crusher turned his attention to the owner. "Put that down before you hurt yourself, old man. This ain't your business." "Everything that happens in my diner is my business," the owner replied, his grip tightening on the shotgun. The situation had escalated beyond what Ali had anticipated. He had faced hatred before, had dealt with threats and insults, but now innocent bystanders were at risk. One of the younger bikers, a man with a shaved head and nervous energy, was inching his hand toward what Ali suspected was a concealed weapon. "Your friend there," Ali said calmly to Crusher, "should know that whatever he's reaching for won't end well for anyone." The young biker froze, his hand still beneath his vest. "Let's all take a breath. I came here for coffee and pie, not to add to the violence in this world. There's been enough of that already." Something in Ali's demeanor, perhaps the absolute confidence or the genuine desire to avoid unnecessary confrontation, seemed to penetrate Crusher's anger. The biker leader hesitated, his certainty wavering as he truly registered who he was facing. This wasn't just any man he could intimidate. This was Muhammad Ali, who had stood against the US's government at the height of his career, sacrificing millions of dollars on principle. A man who had faced the world's toughest boxers without flinching. The waitress, gathering courage from somewhere deep within, stepped forward. "My son served in Vietnam," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "Came back missing a leg and with nightmares that never stop. Fighting more won't honor his sacrifice or anyone else's." She looked directly at Crusher. "And this man has a right to eat in peace, same as anyone." The diner had become a powder keg with the slightest spark threatening to ignite it. Ali knew that what happened next would determine whether the situation dissolved peacefully or erupted into violence that would leave lasting scars on everyone involved. The tension in the diner stretched like a rubber band pulled to its breaking point. Ali could practically hear the heartbeats of everyone in the room, a rhythm disrupted only by the soft ticking of the wall clock. His own pulse remained steady. Years in the ring had taught him to control his heart rate, even in the most stressful situations. "Your waitress speaks wisdom," Ali said, addressing everyone but looking at Crusher. "There's been enough fighting. Vietnam took too many lives. Black, white, it didn't matter over there. Death doesn't discriminate." Crusher's jaw tightened, his internal conflict visible on his weathered face. One of his gang members, a tall man with a snake tattoo crawling up his neck, stepped forward aggressively. "Don't listen to his silver tongue, Crush. He's just trying to—" "Quiet, Viper," Crusher interrupted, raising his hand without taking his eyes off Ali. "I lost my brother in Vietnam. He was 19. His voice carried a pain that transcended the anger he'd displayed earlier. Ali nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry for your loss. Truly, that's why I couldn't go. I couldn't take part in more killing. Not for a war I didn't believe in. It wasn't about courage or patriotism. It was about conscience." The diner owner slowly lowered his shotgun, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The elderly couple in the corner held hands tightly, their knuckles white with tension. Outside, a summer storm was gathering, dark clouds rolling in from the west, matching the mood inside. Crusher took a step back, creating space between himself and Ali. "My brother wrote home once about a village they destroyed, said he couldn't sleep after that, said it wasn't what he signed up for." His voice had lost its earlier venom, replaced by something more vulnerable. "When he died, they sent us a medal, like that would fix anything." Ali recognized the opening, the human connection forming beneath the layers of hatred and prejudice. "No medal can replace a life," he said softly. "That's what I was fighting against. Not America, but the unnecessary loss of life, your brothers included." The waitress approached cautiously, coffee pot in hand. "Why don't y'all sit down? Coffee's on the house." Her offer was directed at both parties, a neutral ground in the conflict. After a moment's hesitation, Crusher nodded, signaling to his gang to return to their tables. Ali remained standing, unwilling to lower his guard completely. "I'll take that coffee, ma'am, but I think it might be best if I take it to go." "No," Crusher said suddenly. "Stay. I've got questions about your stand against the draft, about your fighting." My brother was a fan, actually. Before the unexpected admission hung in the air, Ali slowly sat back down, watching as Crusher dismissed his crew with a nod toward their original tables. The biker leader then slid into the booth across from Ali, his massive frame dwarfing the seat. Up close, Ali could see the man was older than he'd first appeared, probably in his late 30s, with lines of grief etched around his eyes. "Your brother had good taste in boxers," Ali said with a hint of his famous smile. Attempting to ease the tension, Crusher didn't return the smile, but some of the hardness left his expression. "He cut out newspaper articles about your fights, kept them in a scrapbook. When you refused the draft, he was confused, thought you were betraying the country." He paused, staring into his coffee cup. "Then he went to Vietnam. His letters changed. Started saying maybe you understood something he didn't." Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the windows of the diner. The sound created a private atmosphere, as if the world outside had momentarily ceased to exist. Inside, an unlikely conversation was unfolding between a boxing champion and a biker gang leader, bridging divides that had seemed insurmountable just minutes before. "I'm not asking you to agree with me," Ali said carefully. "Just to understand that my decision came from the same place as your pain, the value of human life." For the first time, Crusher met Ali's gaze directly, without hostility. "My name's Frank," he said quietly. "My brother was Thomas." The rain intensified outside the diner windows, sheets of water distorting the view of the parking lot where the motorcycles gleamed wetly under the grey sky. Inside, the conversation between Muhammad Ali and Frank had evolved from tense to thoughtful, while the rest of the Iron Skulls remained at their tables, occasionally glancing over with expressions ranging from confusion to lingering hostility. "I never thought I'd be sitting across from Muhammad Ali having coffee," Frank said, shaking his head slightly. Thomas would have been beside himself. A ghost of a smile crossed his face before fading back into the grief that seemed permanently etched there. Ali leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about him. Thomas, what kind of man was your brother?" Frank's weathered hands wrapped around his coffee mug as if seeking warmth. "Kind? Too kind for his own good, really. Used to bring home stray animals as a kid. Wanted to be a veterinarian." He swallowed hard. "Smart as a whip. First in our family to finish high school. Was saving for college when the draft notice came." Ali nodded, understanding all too well how the war had derailed countless futures. That's what people don't see when they wave their flags and call for more fighting. The individual lives affected, the dreams interrupted. The waitress approached with a slice of apple pie for each man, setting the plates down gently before retreating. The gesture was simple but powerful, treating both men equally despite their differences. "Your stance cost you years of your career," Frank observed. "Your prime years." "It did," Ali acknowledged, "but I still had a career to return to. Many who went to Vietnam didn't come back at all. Others came back changed in ways that can't be undone." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I could afford that sacrifice. Not everyone can." Frank studied Ali's face. "You really believe it was worth it? Standing up like that, knowing what it would cost?" "There are some principles worth sacrificing for," Ali replied. "Worth fighting for, but not with fists or guns. With words, with example, with the courage to say no when saying yes would be easier." He gestured toward the window, where the storm was beginning to ease. "America is supposed to be about freedom, including the freedom to follow your conscience, even when it's unpopular." One of Frank's gang members approached the table, his posture stiff with residual tension. "Storm's letting up, Frank. We should get moving if we want to make it to Louisville by nightfall." Frank nodded without taking his eyes off Ali. "Give me a minute, Deke." After the man retreated, Frank sighed heavily. "My crew, they look to me for direction, for strength. I've led them down some dark paths, thinking that anger was strength. The strongest thing a leader can do is change course when needed," Ali said. "To admit when the path isn't right." Frank considered this, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted a folded newspaper clipping, yellow with age, the edges frayed from handling. He smoothed it carefully on the table and pushed it toward Ali. It was a photo of Ali after winning the heavyweight championship from Sonny Liston, arms raised in victory. This was in Thomas's things when they sent them home, Frank explained quietly. Thought about burning it after everything, but couldn't bring myself to do it. Ali studied the image of his younger self, remembering the exhilaration of that moment. Keep it, he said, in memory of Thomas, not of me. Frank refolded the clipping with careful movements and returned it to his wallet. Then he extended his hand across the table, a gesture that bridged more than just physical distance. Safe travels, champ. Ali clasped the offered hand firmly. You too, Frank. The diner had fallen silent, all eyes on the unexpected handshake between the boxing champion and the biker leader. When they stood, there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Not complete understanding, perhaps, but a crack in the wall of hatred that had seemed impenetrable an hour before. As Ali paid his bill, leaving a generous tip for the waitress who had shown such courage, Frank gathered his crew. Their expressions were confused, some resentful, but none challenged their leader as he directed them outside toward their motorcycles. Ali watched through the window as the bikers mounted their machines. Frank turned back toward the diner one last time, meeting Ali's gaze through the glass. No words were exchanged, none were needed, just a nod of acknowledgement, of shared humanity recognized across the divides of race, belief and experience. As the motorcycles roared to life and pulled away, the elderly couple approached Ali's table. That was something to see, the old man said, his voice thick with emotion. Never thought I'd witness anything like it in this town. Sometimes people just need to see each other, Ali replied, gathering his keys. Really see each other. He stepped out into the freshly washed afternoon, the air clean and sweet after the storm. The encounter had reminded him why his fight, both in and out of the ring, mattered. It wasn't just about winning titles or making headlines. It was about these moments of connection, of barriers broken down, of minds possibly changed. As he started his Cadillac, Ali knew the road ahead remained challenging. One conversation couldn't erase centuries of hatred or heal the wounds of war, but it was a start, and sometimes that was enough to keep fighting for. If you've made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing, will you? I tell these stories with my heart in my hand to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who truly live. If this really touched you, give back, comment, subscribe, come be part of this family with me until the next video.